Hello, if you are watching this episode of Not Overthinking on the YouTube channel, we had a little bit of a mare in that we accidentally deleted the video file. So the rest of this episode is going to be just the audio waveform of it. As always, you can actually listen to Not Overthinking on podcast players, and we will be having video episodes from the next one onwards, because hopefully we won't delete the files accidentally. So yeah, hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome back to Season 2 of Not Overthinking.
Season 2, Episode 1. It's great to be back.
It's great to be back. It's the one. It's been a while since we've done one of these.
Yeah, we took a planned hiatus.
Fully planned.
Season 1 was over. It was time to take a break, and now we're on Season 2.
Perfect.
And that's how these things go.
So how are you feeling today?
Feeling pretty good. Not gonna lie, it feels weird. Like, it's been, like 2 months, 2.5 months or something since we did a pod?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
I think it'll be good.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of journaling the other day.
Oh yeah.
I had a few hours in a random hotel in Cambridge by myself, and
Classic.
It was great. And I thought I just busted out my journal. I have a physical journal now with like little pen and stuff. I sort of have periods of journaling.
Was it your own merch journal, or was it not?
No, it was not. It was launched term 1917. My own merch journal isn't really a journal. It's like a productivity planner.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't trying to plan any productivity.
Okay, yeah.
I was just trying to kind of treat the journal as my own personal therapist.
Okay, fine.
And getting
Yeah,
some thoughts out on the
All right,
page.
yeah.
And one of the things that I concluded was need to resume the podcast.
Really? Why did you conclude that?
I had this whole long thing about like, why am I really doing the things in the business? Like, what's the point? Figuring out if I didn't worry about if I wasn't concerned about money, what would the content the content that I make look like?
Yeah.
And I thought, one of the first things was
Not overthinking.
yeah.
Oh, Ollie, that's so sweet.
The podcast doesn't make any money, so it's all good. What are the pro bono things I could be doing?
Okay, this is part of your philanthropy.
It's part of my philanthropy efforts.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I actually gave a talk at the Oxford Union yesterday.
Oh, nice. Yeah, how did that go?
It was really fun. But I did have 2 or 3 people who, in a very nice way, basically asked me when I was going to start doing philanthropy.
Right.
Move away from trying to increase my. I think one of them phrased it as like self-improvement and revenue as like the 2 things.
What did you say? Next question, please.
Yeah. Apparently, on that note, Lord Alan Sugar was at the Oxford Union like last week.
Oh, yeah.
And when we were on the train, when me and Gordon were on the train to Oxford, we happened to sit next to someone who was like a student at Oxford who attended Lord Sugar's thing.
Oh, yeah.
And she said he was a massive dick.
Really?
She said that he was being asked questions, and he was like, "No, I don't like that question. Next question, please."
I mean, it depends what people are asking him. Like, maybe he didn't want to answer the questions.
No, I mean, apparently people were asking him, he was really annoyed by questions like, what's the secret to entrepreneurship? And he was like, I've been saying it all the time. It's my 5th time here. There is no secret to entrepreneurship. You've either got it or you don't.
I love it.
And then apparently someone stood up and said, well, after a few times of him alluding to this, stood up and said, with respect, Lord Sugar, you were successful in the 1980s and now you're a TV star. And he said something like, well, if I heard you correctly, I'm not going to respond to that. Next question. So that's like, that's good energy. Gotta give the guy kudos for that.
Yeah, I haven't heard much from Sir Alan. So I feel like he's still Sir Alan to me.
That shows your age.
Yeah.
The kids these days are like Lord Sugar.
Yeah.
Whereas the old people are like Sir Alan. They were actually filming an episode of The Apprentice in our co-working space.
Oh, really?
A couple weeks ago. Karen Brady was there.
No way.
Yeah, she poked her head in through the door because they were filming on floor 5.
Really? Into your office?
Into our office.
Dude.
And George sneakily took a photo of her.
Oh, mate.
So there's a great photo on the Slack of her just
Karen Brady.
Karen Brady just peering through me like, what the hell is going on in that office?
I liked Karen. Yeah. She and Nick Hewer.
I don't know if Nick's still around.
No, I think Nick now hosts like one of these comedy shows. Yeah, I think Nick now hosts Countdown. I think that was his next gig.
Yes, that was his next gig, wasn't it?
Yeah. All right, moving on from niche British television. Okay, so you were in a hotel alone, you were journaling, and you concluded that, what would I do if I didn't have it, if I didn't need any money? And you concluded, I'd do Not Overthinking.
Correct. And I concluded I'm going to bring back the monthly favorite series on the YouTube channel, which had very low views but was fun to do.
Yeah.
And I concluded that I'm going to start a new little series on the YouTube channel called Sunday Snippets, where I can just share whatever thought is on my mind that week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unencumbered.
I know. It's great. It feels very... It feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah.
Now that I can just let Angus deal with worrying about making money for the business, and I can just focus on, working on my music. As
Nice.
they say.
I love it. Good for you, man. Good for you.
I know it's good, isn't it? So we have a few things we need to do in this episode.
Yeah.
The first one is we need to figure out what our new intro for this new season is going to be.
Yes. Yeah. old intro is very out of date at this point.
Yeah.
I'm neither a data scientist nor a writer.
I think it's been like 4 years since we've started this podcast. Did we start in 2018 or 19?
It's been 3 years.
It's been
3 years and a few months.
Yeah. I swear we
Yeah.
started in like March 2019.
Yeah, we did.
That was when we were in Paris. That was when I got arrested in Paris.
Yeah,
March
yeah.
2019.
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh, that's been an absolute...
Why is the laptop open? Can we just address that for a second?
Because we're just sorting out an intro, so I need to write stuff down.
Okay, fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Good, that's fine.
We need an intro. The previous one is, my name is Ali, I'm a doctor and YouTuber,
I'm Taimur. I'm a data scientist and writer.
and you're listening to Not Overthinking.
The weekly podcast where we think about happiness, creativity, and the human condition. Wow.
Wow.
What a load of bricks. Who came up with that?
Yeah, exactly. How did they come up with that? Okay.
All right.
So we need. I think that format works. I do feel bad about it because it's like trying to sort of signal the nouns that one would have on one's
Yeah,
Twitter bio.
yeah.
And we also need. We don't really talk about creativity in the human. I think the human condition is good. Well, I feel like I drafted an intro for this in my journal.
Oh, did you actually?
Oh, it's in my bag. Bag's far away.
Happiness, creativity. The happiness thing, it's just human condition.
Yeah.
Let's focus.
Oh no. Okay. And the weekly podcast where we talk about what's going on in our lives and the pursuit of happiness in the human condition.
No. Okay, basically, I think that what's going on in our lives, it doesn't need to be said. Like,
Okay.
it's a podcast. It's two dudes on a podcast. Of course, they're going to be talking about what's going on in their lives, right?
But at least this would make us feel less bad about it.
No, that's fine. No, I think... Okay, basically, I think the point of the intro is not for, like, seasoned listeners who know why they listen to this, right? The point of the intro is for, like, the random person who decides to, like, try out this podcast and they want to know what it's about or something. And I think it needs to be, like, snappy. I think the human condition thing is
No,
accurate.
I don't think it does. I think it's also a thing for people to word of mouth recommend it to their friends.
That's true, yeah.
Because if people ask me to describe the Tim Ferriss show, I would say, well, he deconstructs the habits, routines, favorite books, and so on of the world's most successful people.
Yeah, and then you start saying optimal, minimal.
At this pace, I can run flat out for a mile before my legs start to shake. The Tim Ferriss show. We should totally do that as our intro. No, okay. So we need the weekly podcast where we think about something in the human condition.
We can just stick with happiness, creativity, man.
We don't do creativity. I think
Yeah,
creativity
it's
is
not. Okay, let's replace creativity with something else.
about life, happiness, and the human condition.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Okay, now we need to introduce ourselves.
All right. What are your labels? How do you identify?
I've been really struggling with this. This was a whole. I feel like we did a whole episode trying to figure this out.
Did we?
Where I was basically having a bit of a crisis as to what should be on my Twitter bio.
Dude, okay, I guess, are you still a doctor? Can you still? Is doctor and YouTuber still accurate, realistically? You don't really do anything around being a doctor anymore,
No, I
right?
don't really want to continue. I wouldn't mind identifying as a ex-doctor or retired doctor.
I feel like having two things, a something and something, it just like rolls off the tongue.
Three things is also quite nice. But
Is
three
it?
things is a bit try hard.
Yeah,
I'm a
that-
YouTuber, writer, and entrepreneur.
Yeah.
My name's Taimur. I'm a entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think two things is good
Should we specify that we're brothers?
in the intro.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that people. Oh, it's two brothers. Like it's.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like
that's
a
part of the
thing.
vibe. That
If
is part of
we
the
were
vibe,
twins,
yeah.
we definitely talk about
Yeah.
we're twins. Dot dot dot.
That's true, yeah.
Okay, so hi there. Welcome back to Not Overthinking.
I mean, that's not what we say in the intro.
I know I'm first drafting.
Oh, okay.
We're Ali and Taimur, two brothers living in London, working on our businesses.
I think the format, like we spent a bunch of time thinking about it. We got to a really good format. I think we just need two new labels for each of us, and then we need to just mention the brother thing.
My name's Ali. I'm a YouTuber and writer. I'm Taimur. I'm a startup founder, Islamic scholar.
Yeah.
Islamic scholar. No. What about just scholar?
Yes.
I'm Taimur. I'm a startup founder and scholar. And you're listening to Not Overthinking, the weekly podcast where we think about us two brothers think about life, happiness, and the human condition.
I mean, I don't need two labels. I can just have one label, or does that ruin the flow?
I think it ruins the flow. We could lean into the X things. I'm an ex-doctor. I'm a doctor turned YouTuber. I'm a data scientist turned startup founder.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah.
I'm a doctor turned YouTuber. I'm Taimur. I'm a data scientist I'm a mathematician turned startup founder. I think mathematician sounds more legit.
Yeah, I think mathematician's fine. My only concern with mathematician is that anyone who's done a maths degree will think it's super cringe that I'm out there like calling myself a mathematician because I did like a maths degree, right? You know?
Do you care about that? Because it sounds better than data science. It sounds more A doctor and a mathematician. It's like sounds more legit than a doctor and a data scientist. Walk into a bar.
Fine, whatever. Like there's like 10 people that study maths anyway, so fine. Yeah.
Nice. Great. My name's Ali. I'm a doctor turned YouTuber.
I'm Taimur. I'm a mathematician turned startup founder.
And you're listening to Not Overthinking, the weekly podcast where we think about about life, happiness, and the human condition.
Yeah, it's great.
Are we going to say brothers living in London?
I don't think we need to say the living in London thing.
I feel like we can't just say we're two brothers. We have to say we're two brothers.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
Trying to figure life out.
right. All right, here it is. Hi, I'm Ali. I'm a doctor turned YouTuber. I'm Taimur. I'm a mathematician turned startup founder. We're two brothers living in London, and this is the weekly podcast about life, creativity, and life, happiness, and the human condition.
We're two brothers living in London, and you're listening to Not Overthinking.
Yes,
weekly
yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
So basically what I said. You
No. No, you didn't say that.
I said, we're two brothers living in London. You were like, oh, I don't like the living in London thing.
No,
Wait,
no.
I've got it.
No.
We're two brothers living in London.
No. I mean, I agreed that we had to do it. It was just about where we'd put it in.
Weekly podcast where we think about life, happiness, and the human condition.
All right, great. So we can record that at the end of this show. And so hopefully when people are listening to this pod, this will actually have the new intro. And then they'll hear us talk for 20 minutes about what the new intro should be.
Correct. So just to clarify, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned YouTuber.
I'm Taimur. I'm a mathematician turned startup founder.
We're two brothers living in London, and you're listening to Not Overthinking.
The weekly podcast where we think about life, happiness, and the human condition.
Perfect. That's good, isn't it?
That's good.
We don't even need to to record that again. Just take that little snippet out. Okay.
No, we should record it again.
I know. I was kidding. Bad joke. Okay. What's next? What's next on the agenda? Now we need a topic.
Well, I think we have a topic. I'm just trying to think, have there been any interesting things over the past few months that is worth updating the crowd on? I feel like life's just been really hectic over the past few months.
Okay, hang on. I feel like there's a better way of doing it. I think we can basically compare our sort of season 1 selves to our season 2 selves.
Yeah.
Because we both had lots of changes in our lives.
Okay, yeah.
And so we can basically chart that journey.
Yeah.
And then maybe this episode can become the trailer. Maybe not.
We don't need a trailer.
No, but like if someone new listens to the podcast, they'll often listen to the very first episode.
Okay, yeah.
Especially on Spotify, because I think that's the episode that shows up.
Oh, really?
But who knows? Yeah. So do you want to go first with your major life updates? I know you have a thing of like when major things happen in your life, you want, for some reason, there to be a 9-month lag.
6 month
lag between when the thing happens and when the internet finds out about it.
That's true. Yeah.
Why is that a thing?
I was thinking about this. It's not because I like imagine any specific thing of like, oh, if like my private life is out there in real time online, then someone might, there's no like specific thing. I think it's just a general aesthetic preference for privacy.
But you literally have a weekly podcast where we think about life, happiness, and the human condition.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of privacy. I think it's different kind of privacy.
I don't think this is legit. I'm going to push back on this because if you want a podcast where we actually have a genuine catch-up conversation,
yeah,
and if, for example, there is a major thing happening in your life, but you're like, oh wait, we can only talk about that 6 months after the fact. 6 months after the fact, it's not going to be interesting anymore. And so we're automatically invalidating a large amount of life updatey type stuff because for the sake of you wanting to have a 6 month lag between.
Yeah, we are.
Why? I mean, I'm not going to be interested in like a major thing happening in 6 months from now when the thing's already happened.
That's fine. Yeah, I think particularly when it like involves other people, so like stuff to do with like relationships and family and even being like too real time about causal stuff, I think just like stuff that involves other people.
Everything in life involves other people.
Not most of the stuff we talk about. Like, think about the stuff we talk about. It's mostly like...
No, it's like, oh, I went on a low optionality holiday with my friends the other day.
Yeah, I guess
And what happened on that low optionality holiday kind of vibes. Even sometimes doing episodes in real time while we happen to be on that holiday.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to pretend like this is some like rational thing.
I want you to... Okay, so...
It's an aesthetic preference, mate.
But that aesthetic preference is stopping us from talking about like some important things.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Not everything has to be on the pod, bro.
But if this is our weekly catch up, then why does everything not everything have to be on the pod?
Look, you're not going to get a satisfying reason, and I think you're wrong to expect a satisfying reason. Like, I think it's reasonable for me.
So I want to have a 180-day lag between things happening in your life and then being discussed on the pod.
Yeah, I'd say like certain things. Yeah. I think basically most people have some innate sense of privacy.
Sure.
Which I think you lack.
Okay.
I think plenty of things are innate and don't need to be justified. Nah,
this podcast is called Not Overthinking. If you'd heard yourself 3 years ago, you'd have been like, bro, shut the hell up.
No.
Everything is worth thinking about, and sort of rationalizing to some extent.
Look, I have discussed this privacy thing with other people, and not just like my own privacy thing. Like I've pushed back on the privacy thing that other people have, and I've talked about it with them. And I do think when it comes to privacy, I mean, it's kind of like, right, for example, you know, we live in a gated community where right now where we are, we're in a gated community. You know, it's perfectly safe. No one's going to come in, whatever. I think that there's still something nice about, for example, when you go to sleep, closing the door of your bedroom. Right? Or like putting the curtains, drawing the curtains, right? Sure. There is something around privacy that is just quite innate in people. And like you could tell someone that, oh my God, you're so rational. You're so rational, man. Like there's like freaking 3 locked doors before someone can enter your house. Like, why are you like locking this one? Like your house is like already twice as secure as like a normal house that's just on a street or something.
Yeah.
My God, you're so rational. But then it's kind of like...
No, I agree. I think again, for example, let's say your causal has just raised a new round or something like that.
Okay.
Right? And you're like, well, that involves other people. Well, we can't talk about that in the pod. I'm like, all right, cool. We can't talk about this major thing that's happened in your life. Let's say you have a kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to ask you what it's like being a new dad. I want to ask you what the hell, like how you sleep deprivation, all that kind of. There's so much interesting stuff around this thing.
Yeah,
it's not gonna matter 6 months from now. I'm not gonna be like 6 months ago when.
I mean, 6 months from then, I'd have a 6-month-old. You still have a bloody kid. It's still pretty early stage.
But you won't be allowed to talk about the kid until there would be this annoying 6-month lag. For the sake of your own privacy, sure, whatever. But it's like, how do we figure out a way to do the podcast because you haven't had this particular stance for any like in the past. And when we have potentially discussed something where it was potentially going to affect someone, we just haven't discussed that on the pod. I'm thinking
that's why this like never comes up. This is like a non-issue.
It's not a non-issue anymore because like if for example there were major things happening in your life, I'd want to talk about those things. Vaguely in the abstract to kind of ask you about how those things are going. But if those things are off the table, it means there is this enormous category of thing that cannot be discussed on the pod, which is not a thing that we've had in the past before. And therefore it affects the pod, it affects the sort of conversations that we can have. It means that there's always this level of thinking where you're like...
Dude, it's not that...
Where you're like, what are some major life updates? And I'm like, look, I don't know. You're the one who now has this barrier to where I'm just like, okay, tell me what you want the public to know.
This is a complete non-issue. For example, there was a 6-month delay between me getting into a relationship last year and us talking about it on the pod. It was like a complete non-issue. It like literally never like... It didn't hinder anything in those 6 months of me like wanting there to be some lag time, right?
It kind of. Well, we also had only 3 podcast episodes in that time.
No, that's not true.
No, it is true.
Wait, really?
We had basically 0 podcast episodes during that time. But I think something like getting into a new relationship is interesting because if, for example, like there's no need to sort of bring up specifics that you're uncomfortable talking about, but just something around the general idea of relationships, what it's like dating, how we found the right person, broadly in abstract terms without naming names.
Yeah.
Is like really interesting and well up the street of this podcast.
I'm not sure I can give you a good answer, man. There is something that feels exposing about like a large number of people on the internet knowing
that you're in a relationship, for example.
Yeah, just knowing about details about my personal life, I think.
That you're in a relationship, or that you live in London, or that you're a startup founder, or that you have a kid. Like what is, or that it's just causal has raised a new round. What are we talking here in terms of quote details of your personal life? Yeah,
I think like anything to do with family, anything to do with race. I mean, you'll notice that I'm pretty, I basically like never specifically talk about individual members of the family on the pod or things like that.
No, fairly often be like, I was having a chat with Mimi the other day and she said this thing.
No, you will. I don't really do that.
You have in the past.
No.
You definitely have in the past.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in a very like general sense, but yeah. Look, basically, okay, I think
that's fine. I'm not saying that the hill I want to die on is that you start talking about named members. But I want you to. I basically want a more satisfactory answer to things of like what are your parameters for this 6-month lag privacy rule?
Okay, so for example, with causal things, right, like things like fundraisers.
Sure, I agree.
You want to be a bit strategic about when you announce something like that.
100%.
Okay,
I'm fully on board. I'm not saying you need to tell me the day before you announce your fundraising thing, so that it goes out on the podcast.
The podcast exclusive.
Yeah.
Okay, we can use the causal example, right? Like if you might recall in December 2020, we had a podcast episode about me having like an existential crisis
Yes.
about like me and Lucas and having an existential crisis related to Causal, right? We talked about that. That was fine because Causal was just me and Lucas, right? Causal's now like 20 something people.
Yep.
If I was going through something similar, I wouldn't talk about it on the podcast
Sure.
for obvious reasons.
Okay.
And like, that's reasonable, right?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. So that's like one class of things that I wouldn't talk about on the podcast.
So we're being honest about your feelings.
Whereas, for example, if I was to go through another like work-related existential crisis and I got through it, then 6 months later I can be like, tell you what, 6 months ago, I actually went through an existential crisis. That's fine.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
The 6 month lag time is very helpful there, right?
Yeah, of course. No, I fully agree. For a thing where revealing your true feelings about a thing has the potential to cause damage to your relationships, you should probably not reveal your true feelings about the thing in a public forum.
Did we talk about this on the pod last time when I talked about my relationship? Did we talk about why I was hesitant to? I can't remember if we talked about it in the pod or if we just had a conversation about it.
Again, I think there are lots of reasons to have a level of privacy when it comes to something like a romantic relationship. But I want to try and zoom into that to disentangle what those specific things are. We've established one rule, which is that if being honest about something has the potential to hurt real people in your life, then obviously don't be honest about the thing on a public podcast. But for example, something like if you were to, for example, have a kid.
Yeah.
It would just be completely bizarre for us to not talk about the fact that you've had a bloody kid on the podcast. Unless you were concerned about like, I don't know, a child out of wedlock or something, a child being put up for adoption. You're concerned that talking about the thing will negatively affect relationships in your life. Because that's like a major life change, for example. And is a thing that's going to be shaped like, how's your calendar doing? We're like, oh, well, I've got a kid now. For example, Gordon, my videographer, and his brother Neil have a podcast called Developing Dads, where they talk about what it's like being a new dad.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be like, oh, we can only discuss kids, T minus 6 months. Because it's stuff that's genuinely affecting their life. And obviously, if they had a major argument with the wife and like things are like a bit tense, they're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I've got a kid. Who cares? Yeah. I want to push you on this point. I want you to give me more scenarios so we can tease out the rules of engagement here.
I think the kid thing, if I had a kid, would I be happy just like talking about it on the podcast right away?
You're like, oh, wife went into labor and now we've got a kid. He or she was born a little bit premature. What was that like? Oh my God. Well, what was the experience in hospital like? Yeah, mate, it's mental. Like a maternity ward and like screaming women everywhere. And like, oh my God, midwives. Like I didn't realize that was a job and like they do cool stuff. Like that would be well up the street of this podcast. And it would be really rogue for us not to discuss that. So I don't think that's a category of things that you'd be uncomfortable discussing.
I think the kid thing is fine.
Okay.
So I think I'd be down. If I had a kid, I'd be down to talk about the kid.
Okay, good.
In real time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like things to do with relationships and family, I'm reluctant to talk about. Okay, basically, like I think if you're talking about a friend or something, I'm not gonna lie, I've got loads of friends. Right? Yeah. And I could talk about a friend in the abstract without anyone listening to the pod, whether that's stranger or someone who I know in real life. I can talk about a friend in the abstract without anyone being able to identify that person. If I'm talking, if for example, being in a relationship, people are going to be able to, identify who I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't like the idea about like directly implicating a specific person and in depth on the pod.
I totally agree. I'm not asking you to give me intimate details of your romantic relationships or otherwise where people are identifiable.
Yeah.
But it is, for example, interesting if, for example, you have been on dates. Let's say you were in a relationship and you'd been on a few dates, and we could talk about the idea.
So we talked about this on the date thing. We talked about this, and I said that like if I went on a date, I wouldn't be happy then going on the pod that week and being like analyzing the date. I wouldn't be happy doing that.
Okay, again, I'm not suggesting that you analyze the date.
No, but that's what I'm talking about. Like the 6 month. That's why the lag exists, man.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think there's a place here where, for example, talking about your experience in a relationship in the abstract without digging down into the specifics of any one individual. Talking about, like, for example, I went on a workshop over the weekend, and one of the things was doing a workshop where you figure out what your needs in a relationship are, and that was surprising for me because I hadn't really thought about what my needs in a relationship are, but now I have this framework to figure it out.
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about that. I'm still as happy as ever to talk about relationships in the abstract.
Okay, but the fact that you are in a relationship makes the conversations about being about relationships more interesting or more personal experience-y in a way that doesn't implicate an individual, but a bit more personal relationship-y than if you weren't in a relationship. If you weren't in a relationship, it wouldn't be particularly, if you and I weren't in relationships, it wouldn't be particularly interesting to talk about what our needs would be in a romantic relationship because we've never had one, right? And so there is a level at which you being open about the fact that you are now in a relationship is useful in terms of allowing us to have a discussion about this important stuff on the podcast. For the record, I'm not asking you to divulge in like intimate details about a specific individual. But
Yeah,
what
so
saying
look,
is that
I'm happy to talk about like
essentially the life
phenomenon
update.
of being in a relationship.
Sure. And so what I'm asking you is that like the phenomenon of life updates of like, I've just had a kid, I've just raised a round, that kind of thing, you know, should probably not be in your 6-month lag thing, but like specific details about an individual, we're not going to talk about in the pod.
I mean, the kid thing, I think I'm fine with the kid thing.
Okay. Yeah, I know you're fine with the kid thing.
Okay, for example, do you get why if I had gone on a date with someone, I wouldn't want to analyze that date on the pod the following week?
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
Because if that person is listening, they'll find it a bit strange that you're analyzing a date without their prior consent. If other people are listening, it just feels a bit weird that you would analyze a date that's sort of, analyze a situation that is unfolding in real time at a place where that situation is a little bit like sketchy, i.e. in the early stages of a date. Whereas, for example, if you were 20 years into your marriage and you talked about like, oh, every Wednesday we have a date night. Oh, what'd you get up to on the last date night? Oh, well, we did this cool thing. No one's going to care. So there's a difference between those two states.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In both circumstances, you are analyzing the details of a specific romantic entanglement.
There are certain kinds of updates which I feel like impose on the privacy of another individual, and there are certain kinds of updates I don't. And I think saying something like, oh, on our date night, we went to see Spider-Man last week. I don't think that's the kind of update that imposes on someone else's privacy.
Okay.
Whereas I think there are other updates that do.
Okay, good. So now we're getting into a rule here of like, if an update imposes on someone's on privacy, then that is a thing that you want some kind of lag or just to not discuss at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then there are also things where like I feel like it imposes on my privacy. But I think you're asking like, why do I have a sense of privacy?
Correct.
But I'm
not overthinking about it.
I'm gonna come back to like it's just an innate thing. It is genuinely an innate thing.
I don't think it is, and it's not an innate thing. It's not an evolutionarily evolved mechanism that you don't want to talk about topic A or B, but you're happy to talk about C to Z on a podcast. That's like not a thing. There's
there is an innate sense of privacy
Sure.
that I think every human being has.
Absolutely.
Right?
Sure, fine.
Do you feel like that needs to be justified?
I have an innate need to do lots and lots of things, which I feel like, using my higher powers of cognition and discussing it on a podcast called Not Bloody Overthinking.
Yeah.
It's worth being like, what is it that you like about bananas? Look, man, I just have an innate need for potassium. It does not warrant discussion. It's like you can take any episode. I have an innate need for a freaking kitchen bin. We don't need to talk about it for 2 hours. I have an innate need to throw my trash away. I have an innate need for entertainment. Why do I watch David Dobrik? It's like I have an innate need for comedy, man. Like I have an innate need for X.
I'm sorry.
It is not a topic of discussion. It's a bit bullshit.
I agree. My argument is bullshit, but all the reasons you gave are bullshit as well. Like it's not equivalent at all.
Your argument of an innate need for X means that X should not be discussed.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying my innate need for X makes me like not want to talk about Y on the podcast. Y being another thing. Like all the other examples you've given are just completely
and
different.
we're querying. Sure, no, that's fine, and we're querying that link between X and Y, and we're also querying whether the need for X is in fact actually innate, and we're also querying what are the parameters of Y.
Dude,
what about Y prime or Y prime prime?
There's definitely okay. Can we agree that there is an innate sense of privacy that most people have? I would argue you have it to some extent, but to a much weaker extent.
I would refer you to episode 2 of the podcast where we talked about the struggle of putting yourself out there. Most people have an innate need to not look like a fool in front of their social circles. Most people have an innate need to not feel ostracized.
Okay, fine. And can we just, we can agree on that. And can we also agree that most people have an innate sense of privacy, of personal privacy? Can we just agree on that?
Agreed.
Right,
most people have an innate sense of personal privacy, just like most people have an innate sense of shame at the thought of starting a podcast or starting a channel.
Sure. Yeah.
And we can talk about that and we can potentially break it down and we can show people that actually a lot of the times, or some of the time.
Yeah, fine.
Things that we have an innate, I'm going to finish my thought. Things that we have an innate need for, that it's we can choose to override that innate need if we want to, but either way it's worth discussing.
Okay, fine, it's worth discussing. We can talk about it. I'm cool.
So
I now consent to this conversation.
Excellent. So we've established that rule number 1 is, will this negatively impact my relationships? or my life in some way by talking about it on the podcast. For example, I would not, if I was moving into a new place, I would not give people the address, right? It's not because I have an innate need for privacy. It's because, that almost does not need to be stated why I wouldn't reveal my address on the podcast. But if I had to justify it, I'd be like, okay, I'd be concerned about risk of harm to self and other people.
Okay, fine.
But if I was living in Monaco, for example, where there's zero crime rate, basically, and everyone knows where everyone else lives, it's like, who cares? Like, wouldn't particularly phase me one way or another. If, for example, I were living in London and I were to say, I don't lock my bicycle, that would be bad because people steal bicycles in London. If I was living in Dubai where no one steals any bicycles because the hands are going to get chopped off or whatever, I would be totally comfortable saying, I leave my bike unlocked. This is a weird example, but what I'm saying is that I might feel like I don't want to reveal my address on the podcast for the sake of an innate sense of privacy. But there is actually there are reasons for that. So we've established that one of yours is, and also one of mine is, do not discuss a thing on the podcast if that thing would result in negative consequences for ourselves or people close to us. And that takes the box for your causal fundraising round or your existential crisis in causal.
Yeah.
We've also established one where it violates the privacy of someone else involved, because unless we've asked for their consent, this is a mistake I've made 2 or 3 times in the podcast in the last 3 years of referencing a conversation I had with a friend where that friend knew I was talking about them. Yeah. Maybe 1 or 2 other people might have known I was talking about that friend, and that friend didn't like the idea. Yeah. And that friend and I went on a podcast where I was breaking down the need for privacy. Yeah. So I took it at face value because it's like, fair enough. Yeah. And if you were to a random ass person being like, look, man, I don't want to start a podcast because I have a need for privacy. I don't want to start a YouTube channel because I just don't want my face on the internet. I would push a little bit on that, depending on how well I knew you. Fine. But I wouldn't you turn it into an hour-long discussion. So what I'm trying to figure out is, can you give me, shed some more light on what are the other parameters that cause you to have a certain need for a 6-month lag for certain things in your life? I think causal is definitely part of it. I think, as someone like... Sorry, I want rules here. I don't want specifics. Sorry, what? I want abstract principles here. Principles for changing world order, shall we say? I think to some extent, I feel like, as someone leading causal, as someone leading a company, leading a group of people or something, it's beneficial for me to be strong and stable, if you will, right? Okay. It's beneficial for me to be strong and stable. And, for example, the kind of stuff I talk about with you or with close friends in private, that's typically not the kind of stuff I'd, for example, as someone who's leading this group of people, where it's beneficial for me to be strong and stable, it is not always the kind of stuff I would want that group to be privy to. Sure. Because I'd want that group to think that you're strong and stable. To think that I'm strong and stable. Absolutely. Right? I'm not arguing with that. And so that falls into bucket number 1. Yeah. But for example, I think I was initially reluctant to actually share, last year, I was reluctant to share that I was in a relationship, because this was now a new dimension of my life that, there might be ups and downs, maybe we'd break up at some point, etc. And so I'm now opening myself up to not being strong and stable, basically. For the sake of the company? Yeah. So if you say that, I've broken up with my girlfriend, been feeling a bit down, etc., you're concerned, you wouldn't say something like that in real time, because you'd be concerned that if one of your 20 employees or 10 investors were to listen to the podcast, they would think, oh, Taimur's not strong and stable this week. Broadly. Yeah. Something on that level. And, I'm all for leaders being humans, etc., and I think people get that. But at the same time, I do think it matters. People know that, there are ups and downs in life, there are ups and downs in relationships. People know these things. But I think if people knew that, this specific week, this specific thing is happening in Taimur's personal life, that would compromise the strong and stable feeling that the group should be feeling under my leadership. And for example, giving relationship updates in real time is a big, it's a big dimension along which it's things go wrong. Yeah. Things go wrong. They clearly would affect my emotional state, mental state, etc. And even as a leader who wants to be authentic and human,
etc. I don't think it's of benefit to anyone.
A leader being authentic and human is not. So, for example, you wouldn't be like saying on all hands, guys, I'm going to be a bit AWOL this week. I've just broken up with my girlfriend. I'm going to take a week off to kind of gather my thoughts, and I'll be back with you guys next week. If you need me, drop me a message on Slack. You wouldn't say that. And you think you wouldn't say that because you want to be a strong and stable leader. Hopefully the skepticism in my voice will come across. This is great. I feel like this podcast is usually you challenging me on stuff.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think there is an element of just like vulnerability, right? But I genuinely look. I think I'm broadly happy to be vulnerable about things. I don't think I'm that sensitive to vulnerability.
Okay.
I'm guessing your point is basically that I'm just being a pussy or something, and I just don't want to like be vulnerable with people.
No, my point is that you're bullshitting yourself into creating a justification for why you don't want to talk about your relationship by saying that if I talk about my relationship in real time and something bad happens and one of my 20 employees finds out about it that week, then they will lose confidence in me because they will see me as a not strong and stable leader. And I'm saying if something really bad had happened in your life, if for example, a close family member died, you'd probably tell your team, like, guys, my whatever has just passed away. If I'm unresponsive, I do apologize. Lucas will handle the Slack.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so that is you not coming across as strong and stable. But I think that is a bullshit justification for why you don't want to talk about a relationship. It's not because you're worried your 20 employees are going to think you're not strong and stable anymore. There's something else going on, and I want to try and understand what that thing is. Obviously, for the record, for anyone listening to this who think I'm being too hard on you, I'm not going to force you to talk about your relationship or whatever, or your kid, or your, I don't know, adopted dog, like if you don't want to. I just want to understand why. And it's unsatisfactory to say, I've just got an innate need for potassium.
Dude, I'm being real with you when I say I was hesitant to reveal to the team that I was in a relationship.
Reveal to the team?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like it sounds like the sort of thing that would have been cause for a team social. Like a celebration. I was like, oh, dude, I'm really hesitant to being honest with the team that it was my birthday last week. Event happened in my life. People are like, oh, cool, congrats. Nice. So, would you be hesitant to reveal to the team if you had a kid, for God's sake? Surely not. Be like, oh man, strong and stable. They're going to know I'm losing out on sleep. Like, come on, man. This is not what's actually going on here.
I think basically the issue here is that people in my professional sphere definitely know the podcast exists. A bunch of them will have even like watched some of the YouTube videos, for example, and that's absolutely fine. But I think what you're basically saying is like you're basically asking me why I'm not happy for any conversation I have with my friends for me to also like have that conversation with people in my professional sphere.
No,
that's what you're basically asking me.
I am not asking that at all.
You're asking why am I not happy to discuss anything on everything on the podcast?
I'm not asking why you're not happy to discuss everything on the podcast.
Okay.
I'm saying when it comes to specific events. So for example, let's say hypothetically you were to you've gotten married last week.
Okay.
That is an event.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to talk about.
Okay.
What's it like? What was it like on the wedding day? What people say, wedding day is super stressful, that kind of thing. Like, how did you feel seeing all your friends and family there? Like, what was the vibe? What was the politics of like the invites for the guest list? Like, how the hell does that work?
Right.
That is interesting. I don't give a shit about your wedding night. I don't give a shit about like the intimate details of your relationship to the person that you happen to have married or not married. What I care about is like, it's an interesting life event. And therefore we can talk about the stuff surrounding the interesting life event.
Okay.
Just like having a kid is an interesting life event. If the kid turns out to have some genetic abnormality or whatever that's like really a struggle for you and the wife or whatever, then obviously we don't want to talk about it on the podcast. That's totally fine. But having the kid is a life event. And similarly, I'm now in a relationship.
Okay,
let me. I'm talking about the life events.
Hey, let me ask you a question. How about that?
Absolutely.
Why, in the example of like having a kid and having like health problems or whatever, like if I didn't want to talk about that on the podcast, like why do you think that's reasonable?
To not talk about the health problems for your kid on the podcast?
Yeah.
Because you might feel like you're violating the privacy of the kid by talking about a health problem, and health is generally one of those things where people like generally don't want other people to know about their health problems. You might think it would be a violation of consent because the kid can't consent to talk about health problems. It might be something that is like really causing you strife, and that's the sort of thing that you don't want to talk about because you don't want to be that open and vulnerable on the podcast. But talking about losing sleep, about having a kid, That's interesting and not sufficiently in my book.
Okay, but if
Or stuff.
I think your kid consent reason, I think that's actually a load of rubbish, and that's actually not what's going through. That wouldn't be going through most people's minds when they'd be reluctant to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made there, but I don't think that's what's going through most people's minds.
Okay.
I
think mostly when in the kid health issue is that if it's not a concern, if it's like, oh, kid happened to be born with 6 fingers, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
Whatever, it's not going to affect his life. Oh, you're going to get surgery? Nah, cool. If it's like this is a real thing that if,
yeah,
or
there's real
for
thing,
example,
big challenge for the family.
Absolutely.
Like,
Or if, for example, you were going through a breakup. If, for example, there were some things that were seriously bad in your private life, which you felt was sufficiently bad that you don't want to share it with your professional network, totally, that's fine. I'm not saying you probably wouldn't post a Slack update to your team being like, by the way, guys, my kid has been diagnosed with condition X, and this has been really, really hard for the whole family. It's like you probably wouldn't do that, but you probably would say, "I've got a kid." You might even say, "I've got a kid." Here's a photo of his fingers. Lol,
okay,
cool.
let's stick with this example. Like, you said two things when I asked you like why it would be reasonable for me to not want to talk about like my kids, congenital whatever. Like, what's the term? Yeah, whatever the term is. Like health conditions. You said like, well, I think you were indexing hard on the consent thing. Which I think is not what actually most people.
Maybe it's not what people are going.
And then the other thing you said is that first you said like maybe you care about the consent thing, or maybe you just feel like that is too much vulnerability for you to want to do on the pod or something, right?
Sure. Yes.
And now,
yes.
If I were to be in that latter camp, if I was like, hey man, like this is too much vulnerability for me on the pod, you might push me on that, and you might say like, well, what's the downside, bro? And I might say something like, I don't know, man, there's an innate sense of privacy that people have, etc., etc. And then you might say, well, the title of the podcast is Not Overthinking. Screw your innate senses of whatever. Like, tell me why. Like, break down for me why vulnerability exists as a concept for you or something, right? Like, okay. But you do... okay, so to be clear, do you think that would be reason? Do you think the innate sense of vulnerability? Okay, let's whatever argument I'm making for privacy. If I make the same argument for vulnerability, like innate sense of vulnerability, like why do you think that's admissible?
Okay.
Why is that admissible in court?
Okay.
Boom.
Good question.
How about that?
Okay. So privacy versus vulnerability. I think
you'd also better keep an eye on the time.
It's convenient, isn't it? So I think the thing with vulnerability
it's like in a football game when like one team is drawing or something and they want to like get the draw, they'll just like waste time or something or keep the other party busy.
Time waste or what?
I think even in like legal cases, like one thing that they do is just like bury the other party with like loads of evidence that they have to takes like years to go through.
So I think with vulnerability, it's on the I'm thinking aloud here. Allow me to opine out loud.
Please do.
Vulnerability is about negative feelings, whereas privacy is about
feelings.
Bear with me. Whereas privacy is about a cognitive appraisal.
These are big words, bruv.
If you were to say, I am going through treatment-resistant depression right now, and I don't want to talk about it on the podcast, I wouldn't push you on that. I'd be like, fair enough. This is not the sort of thing. Again, it's not the sort of thing that you would tell people on your Slack channels.
No, but if I were to say that, I think whatever grounds you're objecting on the privacy thing, you could object to me not wanting to talk about my treatment-resistant depression.
No, because for example, if you'd gotten married last week, you would probably tell your team, by the way, guys, I got married last week, so they can be like, oh, congratulations.
Okay,
and then next time you have pizza with them, they'll be like, oh, what's it like being married now? What's the difference between being married versus not married?
Okay, fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Whereas it would be weird for you to say on the podcast, I only want to talk about the fact that I got married 6 months after I got married. Whereas you wouldn't be telling your team about your treatment-resistant depression, I suspect.
Okay, fine. I think there is a difference there, but I still think you need to justify why, like, innate sense of vulnerability is different. Like,
I don't think it does seem innate sense of vulnerability.
Well, whatever. Just like like on the grounds of not overthinking, like. Why do you think it's more reasonable for me to not want to talk about my treatment-resistant depression than it is for me to talk about like, something that I feel is private? Like, why is it reasonable for me to not want to talk about my treatment-resistant depression if I run a podcast called Not Overthinking, where the whole point is to resist the, conquer the innate senses for things and, drill into why?
Okay. No, okay. So how about this? The problem with talking about your depression while it's happening in real time is that it may cause your depression to become worse. It may cause harm to you in some ways to be talking about this thing, which is a really negative thing that you are currently going through in real time.
Okay.
Cool. What I'm again, for the record, I am not suggesting you need to tell me intimate details about your relationship.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
I'm saying the fact that you have entered a relationship, or hypothetically if you were to get engaged, or hypothetically if you were to get married, or hypothetically if you were to have a kid, or kid number 2, or twins, or hypothetically if you were to retire or raise around and causal, these are life events.
Yeah, fine.
And when it comes to what's been happening in your life this week, if it turned out you got married last week, and you don't want the podcast on it for some reason, because privacy
For 6 months.
for 6 months, that is a large amount of stuff that we then can't talk about. And if that's your thing, if you know what, I don't want to do the podcast because I don't want to talk about married, like just the very fact that I got married is in my category of privacy.
Yeah.
I would be pushing you hard on that because I think that's just dumb.
Okay.
I'm not trying to push you to divulge intimate details of your relationships.
That's fine.
It's specific events in time is the thing that I care about. And
but my treatment-resistant depression would be a pretty major event. That's been a life update. It's been affecting me over the past weeks.
Yeah.
You still haven't said like why I wouldn't hear so much as a peep from you if I didn't want to talk about my treatment-resistant depression. Why shouldn't I talk about that on the pod?
Your treatment-resistant depression?
Yes.
I mean, you're welcome to.
No, but I don't want to.
Yes.
Why would you not push me on that?
Because I feel like it would harm you for me to push you on that. I feel like that's almost axiomatic.
Oh.
I feel like
Let me tell you another thing that's almost axiomatic.
your need for privacy about specific life
Yes.
that's not axiomatic because I disagree with it. And I think, okay, the reason I'm not going to push you, you're not going to hear a peep from me about your treatment-resistant depression, is because I feel like, if I were in your position, fair play, I would do the same. It's not interesting to debate the philosophy behind why you are sad when a person in your family dies. Like, that's just not interesting. But if, for example, you're sad about something, like you're sad about the fact that your fridge magnet broke, and I'd be like, bro, it's just a fridge magnet.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about it. Be like, dude, why are you so sad about the fridge magnet
Yeah,
breaking?
that's a fair point. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, all right, fine.
So for me, if, for example, I were to get married last week, I'd say on the pod, any life updates? Oh yeah, I got married last week.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to be like, any life updates? I'd be like, oh, calendar's a bit busy. Haven't had much sleep. Bro, you had a freaking kid last week. Like, why the hell are you not talking about it? Oh, privacy. Okay. That's where I would have a problem with it. And the reason is, like, you asked me the question of like, what's been going on in your life or whatever. And I'm like, now I need to figure out what you're comfortable divulging. Because it's like, you have said that you have this weird 6-month lag thing. And I'm just like, that's annoying. Like, we can have a conversation about the things without talking about the people. I don't generally want to talk about specific people anyway. I care about, as you do, kind of the broad abstract. What's it like to be married? What's it like to have a kid? What's it like to lose sleep? Rather than, is your kid a dickhead? Is your wife annoying? Like, that's irrelevant.
Is your kid? Why would you say that on podcast?
I have heard parents describe their kids as dickheads.
Really?
Yeah. It's quite funny.
Oh.
Anyway.
Okay, are there any things that you wouldn't share on the pod in real time that you'd be happy to share 6 months after the fact? How about that?
Give me some examples and I'll tell you yes or no.
I mean, surely, just like try and think. Like, for example, if you broke up with your girlfriend.
If I broke up with my girlfriend.
Would you talk about that in real time on the pod?
It depends how seriously it negatively affected me.
Okay. Let's say like, all right, it was like, you just broke up with your girlfriend. For you, it had been fizzling out over months. Like you were emotionally checked out at this point. Like you're glad to move on.
Yep.
It's not negatively affecting you. Yep. Would you talk about that on the pod in real time?
I would mention the fact I've broken up with my relationship, as in the life event, but I probably wouldn't talk in details about it. Assuming I'm emotionally checked out, so I don't particularly care. Knowing that there's a chance you might listen to the podcast, and there's a chance that might negatively harm her to hear me talking about it in such a blasé fashion.
Okay.
But I would have no qualms of being like, it's kind of kind of crap, broke up with my girlfriend, be like, oh, sorry to hear that, man. Do you want to talk about it? No, not really. We'll talk about it offline. Fair enough. Let's talk about kitchen bins.
Yeah.
You know, that would be totally reasonable.
Okay. So you can't think of anything that you'd rather talk about with a 6 month delay on the pod?
I mean, not unless it falls into the rules we've already described, or it's going to cause harm to people, or like negatively affect my life or the life of people around me in some way. It's just like a life update, like just like an event that happened. If I was like, I honestly can't think of something. If for example, it was like, you know, I'd been on, I don't know, a 5th date with a girl, and I was about to ask her if she wants to be exclusive or something like that. Again, probably wouldn't mention that in real time.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing that has the potential to negatively impact a relationship.
Yeah.
But once we're in a relationship, it's like, oh, by the way, I've now got a girlfriend. Cool. What's that like? Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
How did it happen? Like, you know, when did you know she was right for you, et cetera, et cetera. Be like, oh, well, you know, in the abstract, A, B, and C. How does she make you feel? Oh, she makes me feel warm and fuzzy. It's, you know, it's a fairly surface level, not fairly innocuous things.
Right.
But at least it opens up the discussion for us to then be able to talk about relationships in the abstract, knowing that this is something that's personally resonant with us.
Right. Okay, look, I think I'm gonna need to meditate on this a bit more.
That's totally fine. Whoops. Speaking of, the girlfriend is calling. Let me just message her.
Wow, that was literally real time.
It literally was. Have a think about it. Have a meditate about it.
All right,
that's a good place to leave this. I actually do have a bit of a review. This was a comment that was posted in 2021, in October 2021, which I saved into my Not Overthinking Apple Notes folder because I thought it was funny, and we mentioned it at some point, but I don't think we ever got around to mention it.
Okay.
Here we go. It's from the ThetWP_. Guys, small request. In every single podcast, and a video on Ali's channel too, your bowel movements are mentioned. Without fail. Trust me, as sad as it is for me to make such an observation, I notice every single time because I react the same way every time. Dismay emoji. Is it necessary? Is it for humor? Are you trying to seem relatable? I just don't get it. There's nothing funny or necessary about mentioning your, quote, morning poo. It's just crass and oversharing at its finest. I, for one, really don't want to think about your daily endeavors in the bathroom. Please, please, please consider leaving it out of your discussions. I have a lot of time for you lads, but this reoccurring topic ain't it. Especially when I'm catching up on the pod about to devour my lunch. Yuck, please don't.
That rings a bell. I feel like I've read that. Why did you want to read that?
Oh, I just had it saved in my Apple Notes folder. It's the only other thing I've got saved in my Apple Notes folder for Not Overthinking.
Oh.
And then comment, is this a shit post? Robert says, get over it, lol. This is how you talk in the UK. And then the original OP says, mate, I'm from the UK. I can assure you unpleasant bathroom chat most certainly isn't a common topic during intellectual conversations. Huh. So I just thought I'd share.
Okay.
I feel like we've gone a whole episode without discussing our bowel motions. That's good.
Yeah, we haven't. Well, 6 months lag and all.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Real time.
Yeah.
Real time motions.
Which pretty well describes my bowel movements. No. Why don't we read out a review and then
excellent
call it quits?
Are we still getting reviews?
I don't know. How does one check reviews? I used to go on chartable.com. What's the latest?
No idea. Spotify? iTunes?
Well, let's go on chartable.com. I'm still logged in.
Oh, by the way, one thing that we tried to do in the past was to get audio messages in from listeners so that we could use them as a starting point for discussion on the pod.
I've still listened to every audio message we've gotten sent in.
Nice. But we've never had a system for it to actually play them on the pod. But if you would like to send us an audio message so we can discuss it on the pod, if you can email it to...
okay, here's the thing. All right,
yes.
Here's the thing about audio messages.
Yes.
It's usually pretty hard to, like, it would be very hard for us to actually include the audio message on the pod without, like, major editing. Because, you know, they're usually pretty freeform. It's usually someone just kind of, like, developing their thoughts, sharing their thoughts at the same time. Like, it's not, you know, these are not just, like, concise, like,
okay,
here's a question, here's my take.
What if it was less than 30 seconds? I feel like if it was less than 30 seconds, it would be very doable to actually just play it wholesale on the podcast and then discuss it.
I swear also most of the people that have sent us audio messages... Well, at least probably like half of them have actually said that they'd rather it not be played.
Oh, that's fine. If you'd rather not it not be played, that's totally cool. But I'm just thinking that it might be an interesting addition to the pod, especially as we kick off a new season. Anyway, if you have
30 seconds, yeah.
Okay, if you have an audio message that you would like played on the podcast and discussed, which is less than 30 seconds long, if you can email it to me directly, ali@aliabdaal.com, then I will have someone on my team sort them out and put them into a little Notion database so that we can just play them and discuss them on the pod. If not, that's totally fine. No worries at all. And either way, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
I was about to read a review, mate.
Oh, sorry, you're about to lead a review. Oh,
All right, this is a review from a few weeks ago. It's a 5-star review from Da Hunch in Great Britain. It's entitled "So Good but So Frustrating." They say, the dynamic between these two is great, and the topics and meandering conversation is always super engaging. Every episode ends with a renewed promise to become more consistent with the schedule, and then, haha, sure enough, a 6-week wait. Come on, guys, you have fun, we have fun, just get your act together.
nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Fair play.
It's going to happen.
Fair play.
It's going to happen.
But we're back on it. We're back on it.
It's season 2 now. It was a fully planned hiatus.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.